in view of what the Minister's just said about the generosity of the scheme and the availability of it now compared to some of the alternatives, could you just comment on the number you've given, which is that the remaining 17,000 applications will be processed by spring of next year? How many are you doing a month at the moment?
So I think we are, Ben, correct me, but I think we're down to 16,000 remaining applications.
16,000?
16, yeah.
So that number's been revised down by 1,000?
Yeah, so 16,000. Ben, maybe a comment on how many we do a month, but I think in the last 6 months it's gone down by 5,000, I think. Yeah. About 5,000. We've significantly increased the numbers of caseworkers that are taking the eligibility decisions. We're now up to, I think, 150. So on that basis, we...
about 800 a month at the moment for the last 6 months.
I'll write you on the... Well, Minister will write you on the detail of that, because I'm sure we've got those stats, but I don't have it to hand.
But, I mean, 800 to 1,000 is the kind of number you're gesturing to for the last 6 months.
If I may, I mean, the 16,000...
You've done 5,000 in that period.
It comprises different kinds of casework that we have to work through. Some of them are initial applications, some of them are re-applications, some of them are reviews that the applicant has requested, some of them are additional family member applications and reviews. So I can't put a macro figure on all of it. What I can say is we are confident that all principal applicant decisions on current modelling will be complete by August of this year, and that by March of next year the current caseload, the 16,000, will be complete. That doesn't mean that we won't have casework to continue, because there may well be a follow-on review. It could have come from the courts or whatever, but the current caseload, confident to be complete by March of next year.
Okay, so that's extremely helpful. So the clarification there is that spring is actually spring. You please inform the Treasury. Spring is spring. We like that very much. In March, and I think you've also helpfully suggested that, of course, one would have a worry that if you were operating at 1,000 a month, roughly, it would take 16 months from now, and therefore well into the end of the summer of next year. And you're saying that's not the case. You're going to up the rate so that you finish by March of next year.
So I'm confident on current modelling, and this is modelling, that with the increased resource that Dominic and the Minister directed, that we have now within our casework team, their increased performance, and the Minister directed KPIs which hold us to account to improve, and that in performance of turning around decisions is improving on a monthly basis. So that's why I wouldn't want to say it's 1,000 per month.
Because you're even if that was the rough or even somewhat generous interpretation of the last 5 months, you think it will be going much faster between now, and it has to in order to hit the March deadline.
Agreed.
And can you just comment for a second, General Ben, on the composition of the last 16 compared to the 16,000? Because obviously you could have all the tough nuts being left to the last minute, or you could have a situation in which they were cracked early and it's a relatively smooth sailing. How is that working?
So I guess one doesn't know until one lifts the lid, and so one doesn't know.
You'll have a sense though, won't you? Because you'll have been sampling and you'll know what the breakdown of application types
if I focus on the principal applicants,
yeah.
Yes, there are some complex cases in there. Complex cases meaning those, for example, who may have been dismissed under UK government employ, and we need to go to the Minister. Category 4 decisions, which all go to the Minister for his consideration, as well as those which require sort of significant enrichment. However, what I can say, and the Minister alluded to this figure earlier, up until July last year, we were looking at around a 5% grant rate on the. I think we've had about 190,000 pieces of casework come into DAR over the years.
Sounds like my caseload in my constituency.
So you could imagine those who applied early have. The statistics would show us that the grant rate was higher than those who applied at the very end of the programme. So when we saw a spike at the end of last year, as we worked through those cases, and I'd rather not expose the figure in detail, but we are seeing a lower grant rate of the cases that have come through at the tail end. So each one gets the same consideration as a grant, but the simple answer to your question, yes, there are more complex cases at the tail of any programme, but we are still confident with our modelling of a spring term.
Just to be clear, as an operational matter, there's no suggestion that any pressure is being applied to deny cases that would otherwise receive grants.
Absolutely
You're
not.
content that the procedure is still as robust, if not more robust, than it started out being?
Absolutely, and the rights of reviews, and we have assurance processes in place as well, so no pressure at all.
That's very helpful. And you talked about principal applicants. What's the status of the non-principal applicants?
The principal applicant is
how many are there, and what's the kind of timetable associated with them, for example?
So, in my terminology, principal applicant is the person on whom the eligibility would rest or fall. That principal applicant will then have immediate family members he or she is entitled to bring with them, and then it's the additional family members they may then apply afterwards to grant their eligibility. Principal applicants, say, by late summer, and the current caseload by spring next year.
And that's partly the reason why I instructed the introduction of KPIs, because as a minister who signs off letters to people chasing up casework, I did not feel it was acceptable that we were saying to people, especially those with complex cases that have been waiting many years for a decision, that they didn't know where within the process they were. And so the introduction of KPIs is designed to help individuals understand where they are in the process, help the members of parliament that are advocating on their behalf in order to understand where in the process they are. So we not only have set out KPIs for complex and non-complex cases, but we've also set out those with stages, so people can understand if you're at stage 1 of a 5-stage process or stage 3 of a 5-stage process, to help people understand where they are in the processing. That is all part, in my mind, of stabilising the schemes and building a scheme that is more sustainable, so people can understand how we are shutting it down. But if it is useful, Chair, I'm happy corresponding privately about some of those figures so we can give a sense of where we are aiming at in terms of our progress during this period. But we're aiming for spring next year to finish casework.
I think it's very helpful, and perhaps also just picking up General Ben's point, commenting a little bit about privately on the rate of grant now and the factors affecting that. I think that would help us. Can I ask, just Minister, following up on your point though, are all aspects of the programme compliant with the KPIs that have been set?
So I would like us to be delivering against every KPI. We're not yet there on every KPI, and one of the reasons that I feel strongly about us publishing them is we should be honest about our performance against them. And it's one of the reasons why we've instructed that there should be additional resource applied to the casework, because I was not comfortable with the massive backlog that we inherited, nor was I comfortable with the fact that it was hard to get visibility of the backlog that we had inherited. And so whether the MOD, we are running effectively an immigration scheme that should have an element of transparency that was not there in July 24. We've included that with the clarity on the phases between now and 2029 and the KPIs and the individual self-checker, not for those affected by the data breach in 22, but there's a self-checker now on the MOD website that enables people to insert their ARAP or other reference numbers to see for themselves where they are in the process. That has anecdotally changed some of the casework that members of parliament are receiving, because it's quite legitimate for someone to say, I've applied many moons ago, I have no idea where I am, can you find out? That's an entirely fair challenge that we were not able previously to answer. Since we've introduced these KPIs as part of stabilising the schemes, we are now able to answer that question. That seems a fair and reasonable question for anyone to apply.
So you've introduced a KPI in relation to casework because you were worried about it not running fast enough. Which are the other KPIs that you're not meeting at the moment?
So we published the KPIs, and the data is now aligned to the Home Office immigration publication, which I don't think is many days away in terms of the next set being published. Against all of those, we're prioritising the principal applicants, so we're performing better against principal applicants than we are perhaps against some of the additional family members, which would normally be the kind of beyond principals, the immediate family members, then the additional family members. It's right because that gives us the clearest sense of what is the pipeline afterwards. So I want to clear this pipeline to close this programme, and that's why we're focusing on principals first.
Okay. Maybe I can ask General Ben, which of the KPIs you're not meeting at the moment?
In terms of eligibility casework?
Well, in terms of any of the KPIs that have been published in relation to the scheme.
So the KPIs which are published are the eligibility casework. I mean, they're online. I'll be honest, I think we are not meeting enough of them. But as the Minister said...
name some, just so we've got them in the record, we know which ones to look at and think about, that you're thinking about?
I would look at... So again...
I'm asking, stop for a second, Minister. I'm talking to Major General because I want him to give me an operational answer to the question of what KPIs are not being met.
I was going to give you the answer to that question, but give it a go.
By all means, come in after that. But I just want to get a sense of what...
Well, if I give an example...
standpoint, what is not being met?
We are not meeting some of the KPIs on how many complex cases we still have which have not been resolved for over 24 months. And there's an understandable logic to that, because if it came into the system a period of time ago, there's a time lag, and so it will always sit there. But what I think the important point, I suppose, I'd like to make is it drives changes in behaviours. So I inherited the casework team a few months ago, and it allows me to have that sort of management information, to have the conversation with the senior civil servant who runs that team, and who can then make evidence-based judgments, and we can make evidence-based judgments about where more resource is required, where we need to reprioritise.
Will you write to us on the KPIs that are being missed at the moment, and just give us a sense in detail as to why, a sentence or two as to why that's happening? And then the other question is, where you are missing them, is your strategy going to be to change the KPI or to change the plan?
That's probably a me question.
I think so, yeah.
Ben question. So we will publish the KPIs. It's one of the key parts of the instruction that I've given, that we should be transparent about the performance. It's not where I'd like it to be, but it's a lot better than we inherited in July 24, and it's designed to show the improvement and the accountability of this process to people. They'll be published alongside the Home Office stats, so we're aligned effectively against those numbers, and that's the right place for us to be. And I'm happy providing a little bit more commentary to the committee to help inform that. Broadly...
We'll get those next week or two, or whatever it is, and then you'll write to us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm happy providing some narrative just to kind of expand.
And you'll respond to the question in each case as to whether or not you're going to vary the KPI or we hit the plan.
So we're not varying the KPIs,
okay.
And that's one of the reasons why we've added additional resourcing that Dominic mentioned about additional caseworkers, because I wanted to be clear about what is the expectation that people should have about how many we can process in a time, and if we're not hitting those KPIs, so we felt were a reasonable amount of time to be for any of these casework to take, we've additionally resourced it to try and get after that problem.
Okay, thank you.